Hello again. Last time we started talking about God's plan for unleashing the real you. We began to talk about how God can supernaturally transform your human consciousness and how you can then realize your maximum human potential in this life. You can conquer your addictions, your obsessions, bad habits, and trauma-induced dysfunctions. For this video, I want to unpack these ideas further. St. John of the Cross uses some specific language to explain how, with God's help, we can be stripped or purged of our bad habits that cause us to make bad choices in life. In large measure, we can be spiritually healed when our bad habits are dried up, attenuated, weakened, or otherwise put to sleep. You can think of this as our bad habits getting starved and ultimately becoming weaker. Think about what it means to starve something. To starve something means you deprive it of energy or power. And when you take power away from an enemy, that enemy can no longer easily hurt you. That's the whole idea here. We want to rob your addictive tendencies of their power over you, or of their ability to influence or control you. By weakening or putting to sleep your bad habits, they will no longer dominate you. We achieve this by calling upon the power of God and inviting God into our lives through prayer and contemplation. This is the core of Christian-style mysticism. Are you starting to see how all this works? Another fascinating illustration that St. John offers us has to do with a cleansing fire. Throughout this video series, I've been sitting in front of a fireplace. This is no accident. It's meant to be symbolic. A wood-burning fire is highly representative and signals how we can be spiritually transformed into the men and women God always intended for us to be. As you think about a wood-burning fire, what's happening to the wood? The wood is said to be enkindled, and it becomes combustible. What exactly happens during the so-called enkindling process? When the wood comes into contact with a heat source, the wood quickly dries out. The wood then suddenly erupts into flames and is ultimately destroyed as fire consumes it. The wood gets completely burned up and turns to ashes. The wood is fundamentally transformed. Throughout human history, ashes have been symbolic of total destruction. But what is the result of burning wood? What is the result of forcing the wood to turn to ashes? Light. Bright light is the result of the destruction of sin. You can become a bright light. I'm going to stop right here. I want to give you a chance to think about what I just said. What I'm talking about can be life-changing and beneficial to you. And I believe it has the potential to transform the lives of millions of people all over the planet. Based upon my years of research and decades of life experience, I'm convinced that the secret to a better world starts by fostering healthier individuals. People matter. One person can make a huge difference, for either good or bad. I would love to see vast numbers of people achieve spiritual transformation and become mentally and emotionally healthier. My view is that it's going to take the personal growth and increased emotional wellness of individuals if we want to improve our larger society and humanity as a whole. I'm sure you're aware that the world is facing some pretty big challenges nowadays, but people need to change before society can. God-centric spiritual growth amongst many individuals is the change agent our world desperately needs. In my view, God-centric spirituality is the last best hope for this planet and for the people living on it. If we continue on our current trajectory, things don't look so good. I mean, check out the daily news. It's no secret. It's not rocket science to figure out what's happening in the world. It's more like a blinding flash of the obvious. My point is that something big needs to change. Specifically, people's minds and attitudes need to change for the better, and soon. Okay, let me summarize all this briefly in plain English. Basically, it's all about you. Maybe all your life you felt like you were worthless. Maybe somebody told you that you were no good and you believed them. All that is wrong. Totally false. The truth is, you were originally made by God to be a bright light. You are beautiful. You are brilliant. You, my friend, are a blazing bonfire of spiritual light. The spirit consciousness that lives inside of you right now was perfectly crafted by the same omnipotent God of the universe, the same God that assembled and engineered this great cosmology that we're all experiencing and sharing together. Unfortunately, through no fault of your own, your spirit got exposed to our toxic physical world. Things happened to you, and your real identity became distorted and clouded by this harsh earthly environment. We live on this savage planet, and bad things happen to all of us. This is a physical world. It's not a spiritual world. The earth is not like heaven. Living in a physical universe causes us to get hurt, and we're all wounded in different ways. That's just life. But your life story can be transformed. Maybe you started out badly, but you can finish wonderfully. The future direction of your life can be corrected by the grace of God's loving intercession. That's how it happens. God gets involved in your life. Transformation into a healthier mental and emotional state of being is possible. It's available to you through the lifestyle practices of Christian mysticism. With some serious initial effort on your part, you can be spiritually transformed. It's not too late. You can change your behaviors and your attitudes. You can begin to recover. You can recapture a large part of your original, natural, beautiful state of spiritual being. This happens when you starve your bad habits, and they begin to lose their power and control over you. You can have a better life once your addictions and attachments burn up and turn to ashes through mystical prayer and contemplation. St. John of the Cross called it unitive contemplation. Unitive contemplation is the highest form of prayer available in this world, in this life. It's what all the ancient monks, the priests, the desert fathers, and the nuns, it's what they all sought after. It's what they spent their entire lives striving to experience. It's through unitive contemplation that God touches us and can heal our hurts and our brokenness and help us build character. With God's help, we can achieve excellence in ourselves and achieve much of God's original vision and plan for us and for our lives. This way of living and thinking originally comes from the Bible. Jesus taught about it. But I think it's a little clearer in the words of the Apostle Paul, who wrote about dying to self. Paul wrote about these ideas in the Bible's book of Colossians, chapter 3, verse 5, and in Romans, chapter 6, verse 11, Romans again, chapter 8, verse 12, and also in the book of Ephesians, chapter 4, verse 22. Mystical forms of prayer and contemplation open a door for miracles to happen in your life. You can be rendered into a brand new person. The old you needs to die, spiritually speaking. Now, I need to be very clear here, okay? I'm speaking about a spiritual transformation that can take place within the human consciousness. I'm not talking about anybody taking their own life through suicide or any other kind of physical self-harm. If you have any thoughts of hurting yourself, please seek out immediate professional medical help. No. What I'm speaking about in this video series is something very positive, something emotionally uplifting, and ultimately something that's life-affirming and enhancing. We can cleanse the brain of its old bad habits. The old you, that is to say your old dysfunctional temperament and toxic ways of thinking and behaving, all that old junk needs to get burned up in God's spiritual cleansing fire. All your sins need to be burned to ashes. Once you're spiritually cleansed and healed, then you'll be greatly empowered to reach your highest human potential, and you'll experience significantly greater joy in your life, in this life. Now, I'm not talking about achieving perfection, but I am talking about striving for excellence in how we live and conduct our lives. if millions of people were to achieve the kind of personal excellence I'm talking about, it would have a profound impact on society and the whole world. But like I said, it all starts at the level of the individual. As I said, it's all about you. Let's consider another quotation from St. John's book, Dark Night of the Soul. John talked about the human soul and how, and I'll quote him again, once it is stripped and denuded of its former skin, He, God, may begin to clothe it anew, clothed with the new man or woman. And thus, this soul will now be a soul of heaven, more divine than human, end quote. Wow, that is amazing. Once God begins to fundamentally transform us from the inside out, we start to look more and more like Jesus Christ. We begin to resemble God in our behavior and character. That's how each of us finds our true identity. We're God's children. We're supposed to resemble God. Right now, maybe we don't. But that's all subject to change. There's hope. There's hope for you, for me, and for all of God's kids, for all humanity. There's hope. Let's keep going and consider another excerpt from St. John's book. John wrote, and I'll quote him again, once a person's spirit has been greatly refined, the soul receives spiritual favors, for example, inner peace, rest, insight, all from God. These favors are called touches of divine union, end quote. I don't know about you, but this is exactly what I want. I want to be touched by God on a regular basis, as often as possible. This idea of being touched by God is important. It speaks to how Christian mysticism is actually a very passive process. We briefly mentioned this before. By passive, I mean when we engage in unitive contemplation and unite with God, it's then that He becomes the driving force. God leads the process and produces our spiritual development. Honestly, we become mostly spectators by this point. God does the work. It's God who touches us. God is the prime mover. He is the driver of the relationship between each of us and Himself. So, to conclude this brief discussion of St. John of the Cross, we can say that St. John carries on in the tradition of St. Teresa of Avila and consistent with many other Christian mystics who came before him. St. John wrote about this idea that we should seek and want to become brides of Christ, and that our relationship with God is much like a marriage. But a person cannot casually present himself or herself to God for this kind of intimate spiritual union. No, marriage to Jesus cannot happen unless a person first achieves a level of spiritual maturity and purity. Only then is spiritual marriage to God even possible. But this level of spiritual purity won't happen without detaching from any idols, bad habits, worldly obsessions, unhealthy addictions, anything else that competes with God for control of your mind and your emotions. Well, that's a lot of information. We're going to stop right here. I ask that you take some time to think about and mentally digest the materials we've discussed so far. And while you're at it, feel free to revisit any portions of this video series and review any of these materials. And I want to sincerely thank you for investing your time and for watching. I hope to see you in the next video.